Monster presents Heard on Thursdays, the iconic radio talk show that made Philippine FM radio talk. Winner of multiple KBP Golden Dove Awards. HOT. Heard on Thursdays. Your host, Rhea Rams.
Hey, what's up, monsters? Welcome to the show that made Philippine FM Radio Talk, KBP's best podcast program, heard on Thursdays on Manila's hottest Monster RX93.1. I'm your host, Rhea Rams. Now, we talk a lot about how to live well, but what about how we grieve, how we honor those that we've lost, and how we talk about the inevitable? Now, in a culture where death is often kept quiet, the people who work in death care hold space for something deeply human: mourning, meaning, and memory. Our guest today works in an industry that many of us don't really think about until we absolutely have to. But behind the formality of memorial services is a very deeply human job, one that requires compassion and grace and incredible strength. This week, we are joined by Bettina Jose, Assistant Vice President of Arlington Memorial Chapels, for a conversation that's equal parts tender and eye-opening. We talk about the realities of the funeral industry, the evolving ways we deal with loss, and how facing death can actually teach us to live more fully. From legacy and family to faith, grief, and quiet strength, this episode reminds us that death isn't about endings. It's also about connection and care and what we choose to carry forward. So, heard on Thursdays, let's welcome to the show, Bettina Jose.
Hi, Rhea. Thanks for having me.
I am so grateful to have you here with us. Now, could you start by introducing yourself in your own words and maybe tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like in this line of work?
Very interesting. So, well, for everyone, again, my name is Bettina Jose. So I've been in the industry for almost 7 years now. I didn't actually start out in this industry. I was in corporate. I did real estate and everything. So quite the leap, but I do work for our family business. So I work for Arlington. And it was such a unforeseen jump, I think. Well, I think I've always known I was going to end up in Arlington, but I didn't think it would happen that quickly. Deathcare was not the industry I saw myself in.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I always get when people meet me and they say, oh, like, what do you do for work? And I say, oh, I work for a funeral home. I get like the weirdest looks and they're just like, well, what's that like? And I always think to myself, is there a particular look or a particular personality that suits the industry? And the thing is that there really isn't a mold for that. You know, it's anyone with deep empathy and connection. My day-to-day really varies, but I do go to work like 6 to 7 times a week, like I told
Wow,
you.
yeah.
Like I said, you know, death doesn't really choose when to happen. So when I'm needed, I'm there. My day-to-day is really just taking care of the different client families who have lost somebody. So it's a lot. It's a lot emotionally. And I often get asked, like, does it get easier? Or, you know, like, are you a little bit more numb? And I think the short answer is really no. I mean, it doesn't get easier. It doesn't get less complicated. Every time a client family walks into Arlington's doors, I'm thinking about, you know, that could have been my dad, my mom,
Yeah.
you know, my grandfather, my lola, my sister. So it's tough. It's tough work and it's not for the faint of heart. So yeah, that's what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Like, already it sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
And before we dive deeper, I do want to touch on your roots a little bit because, again, Arlington isn't just a funeral home. It's one of the most recognized in the country. And it's also family business, like you
Yes.
mentioned. So you work in a field that many people are, I would say, very curious about,
Mhm.
but they don't really talk about it
Of course.
openly. So can you tell us a bit about your journey into the work? Was this, I mean, you did say that this isn't something that you imagined, but when was it that you were like, okay, I think this is what I got to get into?
So actually, I was fully working in real estate when the call happened. It actually happened because my aunt passed away. So as I mentioned, it is a family business. I'm third generation. So the second generation was the one running it when I came in. So when I got the call, I was really thinking like, okay, I'm just gonna, you know, sort of plug in the hole right now because my aunt had died and they needed more hands on deck. So at first, I thought it was really just gonna be operationally, like I would just help with the marketing and everything because that's what I'm good at. But I didn't realize I didn't realize how immersed I would have to be in the actual work and the
Yeah.
losses of people. So, um, well, going back to your question, like when did I realize, like, oh, this is really different? I think just the first week. I mean, coming from corporate to funeral, like it's gonna be a shift. So
Mhm.
the first week, I really remember I couldn't eat. Like I was not eating for like a whole week, or I couldn't eat normally. I think just like maybe the physical demands of the job, like just having to see so much of that death and like seeing people grieving every day was so hard. I think the technical aspect of the job was hard. It was a difficult adjustment in the first week. But when I started to shift my mindset from thinking, these are people who have passed on and these are, you know, their physical shells, when I was able to get over that and understand, like I said, that could have been my mom, my dad,
Mhm.
and get over that thinking that a lot of people are scared of the industry. Let me say that. I think like one of the things I get all the time is like, oh, don't you get scared? You're around people who have died all the time. And I always say this is my answer. When you think about the fact that this is somebody who was loved so deeply before they passed on, I think that fear dissipates. You don't think about that anymore because there was a life that was lived here before they died. And yes, maybe it's a bit jarring for people to see them in caskets or in
Mhm.
urns. You have to think about the life they lived before they were in that place. So that's the way I think I was able to get over that. But definitely it was a big shift and it was an adjustment from what I was used to. I mean, I was around young people all the time.
Yeah.
I was around like young corporate people selling condos, and suddenly I'm like, oh, like I'm in a funeral home every single day of my
Right.
life. So definitely it was an adjustment, but it was really like the paradigm shift of thinking, yeah, but that's somebody's mom or dad or best friend, and that's the way I view them now too. Like that could have been somebody I loved, and that's how I get over that fear.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
just to give us a little bit of like an idea, how long have you been working in this industry?
7 years.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
7 years. So I had to come in around 2018. So yeah, it's been a while. 7 years.
Yeah. And I absolutely love what you said when people ask you if you get scared,
Yeah,
and then you said that it gets less jarring when you think about the life that they lived before. And
yeah.
it reminded me of something. I remember in one of my classes, our professor asked us what piece of literature is the best way to honor someone's life, something like that. And the typical answers were poetry, biographies, and someone answered, um, what's that called?
Which one?
Eulogy.
Eulogies.
And I was
Yes.
just like, that's that's such a beautiful way to think about
Yeah.
it, because it's not about, like, we focus so much on the death,
Mm-hmm.
and we sometimes forget the life that they lived.
Exactly. And I think eulogies are a great way to see how many roles one person can actually play in different lives.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, one person could have known this person as like deeply sensitive and the other one as super funny. Like, I think it's a great way to see that you never really get to know a person fully. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they live so many different lives in just that one short life. One of the things I love is called The Dash. It's a poem.
Mm-hmm.
The Dash is actually like the dash you see in between the year they were born and the year that they died.
Uh-huh.
So people always focus on the year that they died or the year that they were born, but people see like that short dash in between. That's actually the life that they lived in between. And I think it's a great representation of the work that we do. We're always
Mm-hmm.
trying to remind people of the life they lived. It's ironic because we're in the death care industry,
Mm-hmm.
but we're always trying to find ways to really put the attention or put the spotlight on the life they lived rather on the death that's occurred. It's a tough job, but
Yeah.
it's something that we try to do.
Of course. And what's it like working in a business that deals with grief and legacy, and also happens to be part of your own family's legacy? I mean, are
Yeah.
there values and lessons that you've carried from earlier generations into the way that you approach death care today? And also, is there anything different in the way that you approach it?
Without sounding too biased, I think, of course, we do things very differently. And we aren't a big chain of funeral homes. In fact, this year we're only operating from one location, but
Okay.
um, it's been around for 43 years. We celebrated our 43rd anniversary this June. It was, thank
Congratulations.
you, and it was founded by my grandfather.
Mhm.
So it's really, it hits so close to home. It's not like a multi generation business. So it's been my dad mainly steering the ship since my grandfather passed away in 1992. So legacy is something that is so important in the work that we do, and we try to make sure that that's always the main driver in everything that we do. We think about what our founder Nestor Jose would have wanted us to do. So, just a quick background: my grandfather started the business because he was actually supplying caskets to different funeral homes.
Okay.
And then he decided, like, oh, I want the space for my friends. Like, I'm always giving them free caskets. I want a place that's mine. So that's sort of how it started. So the family business started as like one big family, because you know how like older generations are, like everybody is family to them.
Yes.
So that is, I think, the most important part of the way we do business, is that every single client family that walks into our doors should feel like a Jose, should feel like our own family. We hope and strive to treat them the way we would have treated a Jose losing somebody,
Right.
because grief, I think, when you lose someone, and like grief this particular week has hit me harder
Mhm.
than other weeks. um Grief is so difficult. I mean, when you lose someone, I think it's the most cruel experience, I think, and one of the hardest experiences, if not the most difficult experience
Mhm.
that anybody has to go through in this life. When you're going through that, you're really at the complete loss. You don't know what to do, you don't know who to call, you don't know where to start.
Mhm.
And with Arlington, I think our singular mission has always been to help ease that burden, because it's already such a difficult journey to
Yeah.
begin with. So, with the number of decisions that a family has to make, we try and lessen that burden. Like I said, the mission has always just been to treat every family the way our founder would have wanted to treat them. Because to him, everybody was Bok, which was his like loving,
Oh.
like Oy si Bok, like that was like his term of endearment for everybody, even if he didn't know them. So we want the people we serve to this day, 43 years later, to feel the same way. Like, oh, I know Rafi, I know Bettina, I want them to feel like they're family to us too. And hopefully that mission is continued for a very, very long time. So yeah, legacy is, it's a big chip on my shoulders, of course, because currently I'm the only one in the third generation involved in the business.
Oh.
So of course there's a lot of pressure there.
Mhm.
But I think that that challenge definitely, or that, mission that I've been given in this lifetime, it's not one I take lightly. And I think in some ways I feel like I was really meant for it. Yeah.
Okay, wow, beautiful. And just out of curiosity, I mean, growing up around the funeral industry, were there any misconceptions from your classmates or friends about like what your family did? Was
Yeah.
it something that you ever had to explain or defend? Especially, I mean, if it's been in your family, you did mention that your dad has been doing this since 1992.
Yes.
So you were quite young.
I wasn't even born yet. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
were very young, like, and this was already, your
Yes.
business. So
Part of her life.
I could imagine, like, especially as a grade
Yeah.
schooler, what was that like?
You know what? One of my favorite stories to tell Rio was like, there was this guard in my kindergarten school, who would regularly ask people or the students like, "Oh, anong trabaho ng daddy mo or ng mommy mo?" So, people would say like, "Oh, he's a banker, ganyan ganyan." And then, I had very broken Tagalog back then. So I said, "Yung daddy ko mamamatay tao." Because I was literally translating like, "Oh, he works with a dad." So
Yeah.
the guard was so bothered, and she was like, "What do you mean?" So my helper had to like quickly defend and say like, "Hindi, may-ari sila ng punerarya, blah blah." So obviously my childhood was very different from like my
Yeah.
friends. My playground was the casket selection room. Like, we would play hide and seek in the funeral home. So I was never afraid of
Oh,
the funeral home,
wow.
because I mean, in my head, it was just my dad's office. So
Right.
obviously, it was a very different um, childhood or
Yeah.
upbringing. Like, we would often hear our dad talking about certain chemicals or caskets. Like, for example, my dad, literally, the house he grew up in New Manila, it was where they would stock the caskets. So I mean, like,
Oh
it's
my
totally
god.
generational. Like, but like I said, we just find humor in it, and we're not really scared of it because it's something that we grew up with. Um, Even my own friends, like my friends, my best friends have been my friends since I was like in grade one.
Hmm.
So I feel like they're so used to my job at this point.
Yeah.
Like even my fiance had to get used to it because like you're gonna be stuck with this for life, you guys.
Yeah.
Like it was different. It was very different growing up with this line of work. I still get a few like questions like, oh, do you actually like prepare the bodies and everything? Well, I don't personally, but I
Hmm.
do know how to. I know how it's done. I
Yeah.
need to know
You need
because
to. Yeah.
yes, because that's the only way I know that we're doing it correctly.
Yeah.
And like I said, there is bigger concept there behind just the technicality of that job. We are trying to take care of these individuals the same way you would want your mom or dad to be cared for. We can't treat them as just shells or
Yep.
bodies. These
Yes.
are moms and dads and people who are deeply loved. So that's how we try to do it. So yeah, very different. Like when people would ask me growing up, like, oh, don't you get scared? Do you see ghosts? Number one question.
Yeah.
At this point, if something is knocked over in my office, I just talk to it and I'm like, okay, don't bother me. Trying to work for you. So like, but you gotta get used to it. It's part of the job.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So it does
Of
happen.
course. Of course.
Okay. I mean, as much as I want to dive into that, we're not here to talk about
Of
that. So
course.
let's start with something a little more gentle first. What's a
Yes.
surprising or unexpected part of your job that most people wouldn't guess?
I wouldn't know. I don't know if they would say it's, you know, um, unexpected, but it's actually a much happier place than people make it out to be.
Hmm.
People expect it to be really sad all the time or really, like glum and dark and difficult. But I think because we're in the process of trying to make the families feel lighter, we end up really creating such meaningful relationships with the family members that are left behind, so much so that we know we have inside jokes with them, or like we get to know the person who passed on such a deep level even if we'd never really met them alive.
Right.
So the workplace is actually a lot happier. Not always, of course, there's
Hmm.
still a lot of grief involved, but there's a lot more joy than people would expect, because a lot of the times we're the ones doing the storytelling, or like, oh, my dad loved this, or like he would have loved this lechon, etc. So there are lots of happy stories that were around. So I think that's the most unexpected part of the job.
I love that. It's
Yeah.
actually so comforting to hear that.
Yeah.
Now, monsters, you are listening to Heard on Thursdays. I'm your host, Ria Rams, and today we are talking about death, grief, and care, the human side of loss, with Bettina Jose. We'll be back in just a bit, so don't go too far. More to talk about after the break, only here on Manila's hottest Monster, RX 93.1.
Monster presents Heard on Thursdays, the iconic radio talk show that made Philippine FM radio talk. Winner of multiple KBP Golden Dove Awards. HOT. Heard on Thursdays. Your host, Rhea Rams.
Manila's hottest monster, RX93.1. Welcome back to Heard on Thursdays. Again, I'm your host, Rhea Rams, and we are here today with the Assistant Vice President of Arlington Memorial Chapels, Bettina Jose. And we are talking about the realities of the funeral industry, the evolving ways that we deal with loss, and how facing death can actually teach us about living life more fully. So people often imagine the funeral industry to be morbid and emotionally heavy, but you did mention that at the core of it, your job really is about care.
Yeah.
You're there at such a raw and vulnerable time for these families. So what does care look like to you when someone is grieving?
You know what? I think I was just talking to my dad about this and my mom earlier. One of the things that I've realized in my line of work is that when people come to us, they have literally just had their lives blown up. I mean, they came from either a hospital or their home, losing somebody that they loved. And especially if like it's a death that happened at a hospital, I realize how cold it can be. Like nobody really sees their grief. It's just like paperwork after paperwork. So I realized that when they come to us, the best thing we can do is to make that grief feel heard. And I think that's really at the very core of what we do. Caring for us really means hearing what they need because nobody is really asked. You know, people are like busy with the paperwork, their arrangements, or what do we do now, etc. What are the caterers? Nobody really stops to check in on the person that just lost someone and ask like, okay, what do you need? I know this is hard. So I think in our line of work, or maybe especially in Arlington, for our people, it's really about making them feel heard. Like, we know this is a really tough time and we're going to take care of everything for you. So for us, care really means going the extra mile. I've had multiple client families where we aren't on duty, but we like have to go there because we're the ones that they trust. We're the ones that were there in the first moment. So you don't want them getting, uneasy, like, oh, who is this? Our job at the very heart of it is really to just make sure that everything is taken care of so that they can focus on their grief because that is already so difficult on its own. Grieving and losing somebody, like I said earlier in this chat we had, it's one of the cruelest, if not the cruelest thing somebody can go through in a lifetime. And our job is really to make sure that we take care of everything outside of that grief so that they can focus on that grief and just focus on remembering the person and, feeling and sitting with that pain. So, yeah, I think care for us is really just making sure they're heard, their grief is acknowledged, and we take care of everything outside of that.
Yeah, like giving them that space.
Yes, and they really need that.
And it's very important. Yeah. Now, at this idea of death work or death care, the word itself sounds a bit clinical or like you mentioned cold, but I can imagine like what you mentioned also, what you do is so deeply human.
Yeah.
So what are the unseen parts of your work, like the emotional labor, the gentleness, the small things that people may not notice but make all the difference?
So if I may, I just want to talk about a project I launched just last month.
Okay.
And it was actually centered around funeral care workers because 7 years in, and I'm thinking, and I've realized that so much of the work we do is unseen. I mean, the quiet, steady hand that takes care of everything. We carry the grief of these family members. When they come in and they're wailing, takes a lot of emotional, capacity from us too. When we have to carry that load for client families, people don't see that. People don't see the long hours. I mean, of course, people expect that death can come at any time. People don't often think about the people behind that work. People don't understand that we sacrifice time with our families, with our friends, or doing things that make us feel good because we're often taking care of people all the time. People in our industry usually take care of themselves last. And I think that's really the work of the funeral home practitioners. That's really the work that's unseen. Like emotionally, that's the biggest part. I mean, we lose a lot of time for ourselves because we're constantly trying to do better for client families, but even the physical, labor of
Yeah.
just the long hours and being on call basically 24/7. I get this joke where for my friends and my family that, do I secretly have more hours in a day because somehow I'm able to make that fit? And I said, no, I just don't sleep. Like thank God for makeup
Yeah.
because like not really. But I mean, really, there are some things that get sacrificed
Right.
because the clients have to come first. Their grief has to come first.
Yeah.
So for us, I think one of my great passions in this industry is really trying to advocate for these funeral home practitioners, or I like to call them end of life practitioners, because there's so many of us. It's not just the people in the funeral homes. You have the caregivers,
Right.
you have the people who are in the morgues or in the ICUs, the people who are constantly exposed to death on a
Right.
daily basis. So much of that emotional toll
Yeah.
goes unseen. So, like just last month, I launched this project trying to advocate for a day that really advocates for them. I mean, there's National Donut Day, there's National Girlfriends Day, and hey, boyfriends should take note of that. There's National Sisters Day, National Best Friends Day. There isn't a national day celebrating the people in our industry. And I think that they should really be seen because so much of the work we do is important. Not a lot of people want to do this work. I think it's really vocational. Our work is so hard
Yep.
kasi. So it's not for everyone. Like I said, it's not for the faint of heart. So I was advocating for National End of Life Carers Day to be on June 21, because June 21 is actually summer solstice, meaning it's the longest day in the year,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically what every day feels like for us. Every day feels like the longest day. But it could also be the flip side. We're also the light in a very, very dark time for a lot of people. So there's so much work that goes into being a funeral home practitioner. And, we love the work we do. We're very passionate about it. But like I said, a lot of it goes unseen. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I hope that that
I
project
hope so.
uh pulls through,
I
because
hope so.
yeah, and hopefully this is actually like a first step to giving
Yeah.
more spotlight
Yep.
to those people. Now, let's say someone has just lost a loved one. We know the emotional toll, but there's also so much that has to happen practically and logistically.
Yes.
So, can you walk us a little bit through that process, both from the operational side to the human side? What does supporting a grieving family really involve?
You know what? I'm really happy you asked, because one of the things we learned during the pandemic was how unprepared
Mm-hmm.
people actually are. I mean, we know this. It's our reality that when people come to us, they're sort of lost and they're like not knowing what to do. But in the pandemic, we saw it even more. It was more highlighted because people were just, you know, it, it came out of nowhere. So when death hit them, they really didn't know what to do. So I'm glad that you're sort of trying to shed light on the process. So typically, if the death occurs at the hospital will walk you through the next steps. So,
Mm-hmm.
like processing a death certificate, calling a funeral home. But people often don't know who to call, which is why I am a big advocate of pre arranging or pre planning,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that people should have a more proactive approach in terms of death. I understand that people don't want to entertain that thought. I know that it's not something you really want to entertain, because I think the concept of mortality is tough. Who wants to really live life knowing like, oh, it could be my last day? But that is reality, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like every day that we have right now could be the last, and we have
True.
to be more proactive about that. So, like, our company also just launched this new feature on our website where you can more or less like, it's sort of like a questionnaire type, sort of how
Uh-huh.
like when we grew up, we had those like Total Girl quizzes or BuzzFeed
Yes.
quizzes. It's as simple as that. Like
Okay.
just saying like, oh, am I more into burial or cremation? Like, do I want flowers? How many people am I expecting? And then the website will sort of give you a glimpse of like how much it might cost.
Oh,
So at
cool.
least you know,
Yeah.
because I think it's really important for people to be prepared. So in the hospital, the next step is usually really like to call a funeral home. And then we usually have to transfer the loved one from the
Mm-hmm.
place of death to our care. And then that's the only time we arrange with families. Okay, so what were the last wishes of your loved one? If they didn't have one, what would your preference be? Would you want a burial or a cremation? Are we working with a budget? Do they have a favorite color? or a particular song or flower that we should incorporate. So the arrangement conference is what we call it, where we make all of those little decisions that people would normally not think about. But like
Right.
I said, you can totally think of that ahead of time. I know a lot of younger people or people in our generation are a bit more open to that, like
Mm-hmm.
planning ahead and taking control, like, oh, I want this, I want that. Um, and I think it's not just a proactive thing to do, it's a way to honor your life too. It's like you get a final say in what you
Yeah.
want. Yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting that you bring that up because I've been seeing a lot of videos. Funerals are normally very solemn
Yeah.
and just heavy.
Yes.
But I've seen a lot of videos too where the funerals are a little bit lighter.
Yes.
Like people are sort of
It's a
partying.
party. No,
Yeah.
now because it's really just about celebrating the life of that person. And
Hmm.
of course, we still honor that tradition because a lot of families still want the traditional way. But one of my favorite clients for Arlington was when we literally mounted a fashion show because he was a fashion designer.
Oh
We
wow.
recreated our chapel into a runway and then redesigned the chapel to look like, like a fashion show would, like with people in the front row and everything. And then people in front of his casket walked in his earlier designs. And I think,
Oh
yeah, what
wow.
better way to honor the person's legacy in their life than that way? So it really depends on the person and the family, but definitely I am a big believer in doing it in the way it's best to honor this person who passed away. It's their life that we're celebrating, right?
Yeah.
Not just the loss.
It's actually really interesting because you guys have chapels, right, where
Yes.
you hold these funerals. Um and normally like when I see those videos it's usually held in houses.
Hmm.
So it's interesting. So you guys do that.
Yes, we do. We've even had one where they wanted to dim the lights and they wanted it to feel like sort of a house party with good music. It really depends. I mean, like, depends on the person what they would have
Mhm.
liked. You're used to funerals having like very somber music or
Mhm.
all my love to Gary Valenciano, but usually it's his music playing
Yes.
at funerals, right?
Yes.
But recently I've seen a spike in families playing. I mean, literally, this person is about to be cremated and they're playing like rock music. And I feel like, are they okay with this? But the family is thinking, like, oh, he would have loved this. So I love that the funeral industry is sort of moving in that direction, feels more personal. And I think it's a good way also to encourage people to understand that as difficult as death is, it doesn't have to be as sad as it is already. It is already sad.
Yes.
So why make that celebration of life sadder than it has to be?
Right.
So I love that the industry is moving in that direction.
Yeah. Now I want to talk about culture too because the way that we mourn and remember is shaped so much by our roots as
Hmm.
Filipinos. So, what are
Yes.
some uniquely Filipino customs or rituals around death that stand out to you? Like there's the Davina, the Lamay,
Yes.
the
Yes.
Pagpag, and
Yes.
then how do these rituals help people process their grief?
You know what? I think that routine, as in anything, helps a person grieve. I think for people who have lost someone, just having a semblance of control over something or a routine or something to like sort of tick the boxes off, it really helps them grieve in that process or like helps them in the process of grief rather because when you're planning like the wake, number one tradition is food.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
always food. So, like, who's the caterer? Like, you have your red ribbon or your pancit or
Yes.
your Tetra packs of juice. That's never gonna be gone. I think
Mm-hmm.
simply because one, food is so central to the Filipino culture. So it's not even just in wakes. In parties, what is the number one thing we prepare? It's also food
Yes.
because Filipinos really bond over food. Families have routines or like they have traditions that are centered just on food. Like my mom's pancit was the best. My mom's shapa was the best.
Right.
So it's so central to the Filipino culture that of course it's not surprising that it's also part of the culture of wakes or in death care. So number one tradition is really food and I don't think that's gonna go away. But I think in terms of grieving, it really helps families just have that like semblance of control and like, okay, like I'm gonna plan this and that.
Mm-hmm.
As in anything in life, when you have routine or you have structure or some semblance of control over something, it really helps the family. So when they're planning the logistics of it, I think it does help them. But for some families, it's a bit more personal. Every day is like a theme of what their favorite food was. So
Oh,
one day it's
okay.
like all Japanese, one day it's like Filipino food. So recently we just opened like a potato corner in a coffee shop because you know how like coffee booths and potato corner fries are like central to weddings now?
Yes.
Wakes are no different. So we always have them. And I thought, why am I making it so hard for my clients? I might as well put you there since you always bring it in here. So that's what we did. And it's
Okay.
been such a great, I think, way for families. It's sort of like their pagpag. Like after the cremation, they'll go across and they'll buy potato corner and coffee. So yeah, I think food would be the number one. Yeah, very
Yeah.
central to us as
Gives it,
Filipinos.
yeah, gives them a bit of structure also.
Yes.
Now, thinking about generational shifts, we're now seeing more conversations about, like you mentioned, end of life planning because I guess our generation's a little bit more open to it.
Yep.
So there's also talks about mental health and even digital legacies, right? So have you noticed any changes in how younger Filipinos approach grief and mourning or even planning for death? Are people more open? Are they more curious? Or is there still a lot of hesitation to talk about it?
100% there's still hesitation. I think that that's universal, first of
Mm-hmm.
all. And I think that spans generations. I don't think, getting around to talking about death is ever going to be universally easy or
Mm-hmm.
acceptable. Um, but I do see that now because the decision makers are a bit younger, what I am seeing is they are more prone to DIY. They DIY everything. They want to make their own AVPs. They want to make their own photo collages, or like they're just a lot more hands on. Maybe because we also have the tools for it. Like
Fair.
we have digital tools everywhere around
Right.
us, and we're digital natives, so
Mm-hmm.
we know how to use them. And like before, the this is a simple example, but in funerals they would have like the tarps of the person who's passed away, and they had
Yes.
the doves. I mean, it's
Yes.
become some kind of joke, right? But now the younger ones are like, they're on Canva very quickly and they're making like a lot more aesthetic posters. So I think that the younger generation, while there is still hesitation to talk about death, they're just using the tools that we use for other things, like what we got used to using in school or
Mm-hmm.
for work. They're now using it for other aspects of life and death. They're
Right.
using these tools to create AVPs like Canva or whatever. But in terms of pre planning, I do wish there were more of a shift to openness, but I don't think we're exactly there yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's too early to tell, maybe, but hopefully, like a younger individual like myself, you don't see a lot of young individuals like myself in the industry, which is why I'm very passionate about advocating for my work
Mm-hmm.
in public spaces like this, or in my own social media,
Right.
because I want people to understand that it's easier to have this conversation. A young person like me can have this conversation. So trying to make the industry more approachable,
Right.
like putting a more approachable face to the industry, like maybe mine, like somebody who's younger
Mm-hmm.
and, will relate to you on a day to day basis. Like I'll drink the same coffee you're drinking, whatever. Nothing's different about my life.
Right.
It just so happens that my work is different. So hopefully more individuals like myself come out there and make the conversation a little bit easier to have.
Yeah. Now you mentioned pre-planning
Yep.
a lot. What exactly does pre-planning entail?
Yeah. So for pre planning, for different funeral homes, it may differ. So for companies that have insurance or pre need, that's what you call pre need, you can actually purchase a plan ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it can't commit you to the services that you're paying for today. For example, 100,000 pesos could get you this today, but by the time of need, when the death occurs, say in 30, 40 years, if let's say you're buying it at our age, then of course the value of the money you gave might be different.
Right.
But at least you have, so it's sort of like forced savings.
Yeah.
You sort of have a plan that can be used
Mm-hmm.
just in case a death occurs. So you can buy pre-need plans, but for example, in our company, that's not something we do. We do what we call pre-arranging.
Mm-hmm.
So we meet with a family member or with the person himself to pre-arrange for what their plans are. We keep that on file. We say, okay, what are you into? Do you want burial? Like, what would you like? What do you want us to tell your family, etc. They can like sort of have an account opened in their name just for that funeral plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we assist with.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really like for savings. They'll open a bank account, say in BPI or somewhere, and then that money is set aside. And then it's only going to be released to us when the death occurs. So we basically do the arrangement conference with the person before they even pass away so that they get control over their
Yeah.
choices.
I mean, I know it sounds scary, monsters, because again, you don't want to talk about you don't even want to think about your
Yeah.
own death.
Understandable.
But I really do hope that this conversation uh opens your minds a little bit
Yeah.
more and sees death as again something that isn't always so. I mean, it is sad, but it doesn't have to be as sad as it already is.
Yes. And you know what, Ria? I think maybe just to add to that, one of the things that my job has taught me, and maybe the listeners can learn from, is like I often get asked if death has become, easier for me or like more palatable in some
Mm-hmm.
way or something that I can deal with easier. The answer is really no, because now I'm constantly surrounded by the reality of mortality
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that death can come knocking on your door at any time. And I think that it's something that we can all learn from, not just me, that we have to live more intentionally. I think especially because nowadays our lives are so fast and lives are hard, and I get that. I mean, on a daily basis, we already deal with so much our bills and our work and our families. You don't really want to add to that and think about death. But the fact is that death will occur, and we need to be open to the fact that the day that we have today, that's all that's promised to us. And we have to be more intentional with the way we live because tomorrow may not come. And as morbid as that sounds, I think it's a sobering reminder for us all and even for the listeners. It's not to be afraid of the future, but to take every day with intention, with grace, with gratitude. And I think that's what my job has taught me, really. It's like not to fear death. I understand that death will occur. So I have to live more purposefully and more intentionally. I have no time to waste,
Yeah.
in short. And I think that's something people who aren't in my industry can relate to also.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's cliche, but really, there's no day but today, and we have to seize that.
And on that note, monsters, you are tuned in to Heard on Thursdays. I'm your host, Rita Rams. Today we are talking about death, grief, and care, the human side of loss with Bettina Jose. We are going to be back in just a bit, so don't go too far. More to talk about after the break.
The Monster presents Heard on Thursdays, the iconic radio talk show that made Philippine FM radio talk. Winner of multiple KBP Golden Dove Awards. HOT. Heard on Thursdays. Your host, Rhea Rams.
Manila's hottest monster, RX93.1. Welcome back to Heard on Thursdays. I'm your host, Rhea Rams, and we are here today with the Assistant Vice President of Arlington Memorial Chapels, Bettina Jose, and we are talking about the realities of the funeral industry, the evolving ways we deal with loss, and of course, how facing death can actually teach us to live more fully. Now, grief is universal, but it's also extremely personal. Everybody feels it and deals with it differently. Sometimes even within the same family or the same
Yes.
community. So in your experience, what are some of the different ways that grief shows up? How can we hold space for that diversity, especially when there's no right way to
Yes.
mourn?
You know what? I think awareness is really the first key. When I look at the people who have lost their loved ones, especially those who are closest to me, I'm able to spot the way they grieve already, maybe because it's my exposure. So, of course, you'll have those who are in denial.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, it's the most common for me. They're usually thinking like, oh no, this can't be happening, or they throw themselves into the logistics or the operational part of planning a funeral because it's easier than actually dealing with the loss.
Right.
So people who often dive right into like, logistics and like, okay, what do we do? Like, where are the bank statements? What funeral arrangements are we supposed to make? Those are the ones for me you have to look out for the most because grief hasn't exactly settled in for them
Mm-hmm.
fully yet. Of course, you'll have those who try to make light of things and they find ways of coping or they distract themselves with work. I've known people who throw themselves back into work because, like I said, it's hard to, I think, really face the reality you've lost someone you love.
Mm-hmm.
So there are very varying ways to grieve. There is no right way to grieve. I think what's important is people who are around the people who have lost someone are aware that this is a difficult time and you
Mm-hmm.
just gotta give them that space.
Right.
You can't tell them get on and move on with your life. Some people are unable to move on for years. They're
Yeah.
unable to get over it at all. And I think we have to just allow them that space
Yeah.
because we'll never be in their shoes, not fully, because you didn't have the exact same relationship with them. So I think for people who are around people who have lost someone, there is no right way or right way. So you have to give them that space to grieve differently. If they're distracting themselves, you can't force them not to. You have to let them grieve the way they know how. For as long as they know that they have you in their corner
Mm-hmm.
and you're there to listen, I think the only thing you can do is to assure them that,
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to talk about it, I'm here. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. They'll come around at some point. And if
Yeah.
they don't, all that's important is they don't feel alone. Like in any kind of grief or struggle, I think that's the most important. I mean, even in mental health, the most important saving grace is a person understanding they're not alone in this, right? So
Yes.
same goes for grief. Like don't force them to grieve a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Let them, give them that space and be there.
Oh, I love that. Now, what is something that people often get wrong or overlook when it comes to supporting someone who's grieving? Is it the pressure to say the right thing, to offer solutions when sometimes silence or presence is enough, or like you mentioned earlier, is it forcing them to grieve a certain way?
All of those things you mentioned are common mistakes
Mm-hmm.
from people who are trying to support people grieving. But we have to understand that until you've walked in the shoes of somebody who's lost someone, you don't really know how to deal with grief. So you might be making those mistakes and it's not your fault per se because you don't know how to deal with it. You're telling them like, oh, number one thing you shouldn't say is he's in a better place or she's in a better place. Because for most people who have lost someone, the only place they want that person to be is right here with them. So to say they're in a better place is saying like, so they shouldn't have been here with us. No, I
Mm-hmm.
want that person here with me. So I think that's a number one thing to avoid. It's just
Mm-hmm.
like telling them they're at peace now or whatever. I know that we often mean well
Mm-hmm.
when we say that, but there really is no right thing to say, and I think we have to learn to be okay with that. We're never gonna say the right thing, so maybe instead of trying to say something, just listen, just be there, and that's enough. That's enough for people who are grieving. Like allowing them to understand that without judgment, without pressure, you're just there. Oftentimes, that's enough.
Yeah.
You don't have to say the right thing because there is nothing right to say when somebody is grieving. There is absolutely nothing you can say to make this pain better. Just be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like people underestimate how valuable just your presence is.
Yes. Yes. Just listening, and actually, silence is a lot more powerful than words sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
especially when there are no words. Well, what words can you offer to someone whose life is completely changed by this loss?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing you can say. So just be there. There are ways to be there for them that words can't possibly offer. Like, like a silent hug or a hand holding you or their favorite food. There
Mm-hmm.
are ways to make them feel your love, or wash their laundry for them, or something, do the things, they would struggle doing right now. And that is a better way to be there for the person rather than trying to find the right thing to say.
Oh, I hope this is something that everybody
Yeah. Something I learned too.
remembers,
Yeah.
yeah, and learns. Yeah, you're right. Now we're often taught directly or indirectly to fear death,
Hmm.
or even to avoid conversations about it. Now, why do you think that it's still such a taboo topic, especially here in the Philippines? And what challenges, what changes when we actually finally talk about it, even casually or hypothetically?
You know what? Given the recent turn of events also with the typhoon, well, not just the recent, turn of events, every time the Philippines or our country goes through something difficult, we are often seen as the people who can make light of any situation. I mean, we are able to laugh through it and find joy in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's because that's so deeply rooted in our culture. We don't want to talk about anything that's difficult. And I mean, I'm not saying it's just in our country or in our culture. I think universally there is difficulty talking about death.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think especially in our country, we don't want to talk about anything that's heavy because life is already hard.
Yeah.
Like every day is already difficult, and talking about death feels like a bummer. So
Mm-hmm.
I get that maybe indirectly the reason we don't talk about it is because we don't really want to be sad. There are already so many reasons to be sad, which is why I think my job as a representative or a face in our industry, as someone who's saying, I get it and I see the hesitation and I get that it can be oftentimes sad, but there is
Mm-hmm.
so much joy behind celebrating a life well lived too. I think it's a really important job for me to do so that it gets people understanding that death doesn't necessarily have to be this heavy or this somber or this difficult to talk about, because it's a reality of life, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying I've accepted it. I'm still so afraid to lose my loved ones, and I'm exposed to death every day. And it's still my greatest fear.
Yeah.
But it's a reality of life. It's not something we can escape, It's as inevitable as birth. You you're born into this world and you're gone from this world. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So I think that the reason it is so taboo is because our culture doesn't really encourage talking about anything that's sad. It's the same with mental health. People,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it took so long for us to even get that conversation going because
Mm-hmm.
when you're struggling, it's not really mainstream, or it's not really something that's easy to digest when somebody says, "Oh, I'm struggling with something." Um, which is really, I think, what has gotten us to this point, right? I mean, the number of people who go through mental health struggles, it's also because we never had this conversation. We never gave people the space to
Right.
talk about this. And I think it's the same with death. The reason so many people are unprepared simply because people don't want to talk about it. And like I said, I do get it. But hopefully, with more people like me in our industry, people become less afraid of that conversation, because it's not just about the death that occurs, it's about the life that they lived. So hopefully we can shift focus on that instead.
Now, I imagine that being around grief every day would shift your perspective on life itself.
Hmm.
You already did mention that, it's taught you to live life more fully
Yeah.
and more intentionally. Now, has this job also changed the way that you see love or relationships or even your own mortality? Has it made you a little bit more intentional, or how has it made you more intentional with the way that you live your life?
100%. I think my exposure to it daily, on a daily basis, I mean, it's not perfect. It's not perfect intentional living. But what I've found with myself over the past couple of years being in this industry, and maybe with age, is that I just don't feel like I have time to waste, because I could step out of the studio and life could change,
Right.
So what it's done for me is, if it's no longer serving me, if it's not bringing me closer to the person I want to be, if it's not bringing me to the kind of love I want to experience in this life, I don't want it. And it's as simple as that for me, because in my head, or maybe in my body, I can feel I have no time to waste. If I want to say something, if I want to post something, if I'm not hurting anyone, I'm going to do it
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know how much longer I have. And it still scares me. Don't get me wrong. It
Mm-hmm.
still 100% scares me. I want to live to have a family and to get married and all of these things. But it's made me maybe have less tolerance for things that, what would have been such a big deal to me before. Now it's like I don't really have tolerance for it. Like it's menial. If I feel like I can live without it, I'm just like, it's easy for me to get rid of it. That applies to relationships, to friends, to, habits in my life. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, if this is not bringing me closer to the person I want to be, and if this is the only life I have, then I'm not going to waste my time on that. Yeah.
And I hope that this is something that our other listeners also
Mhm.
take to heart. Because, I mean, you have the privilege, I would say, of,
Yeah.
being in this industry
Yeah.
and realizing these things that
Yes.
I think take a lot longer for other people to realize because
Yes.
they're not exposed to it.
Exactly.
So listen well,
Yeah.
monsters.
I mean, people think we live on unlimited time because, like I said, life is so fast
Right.
for us nowadays. So they think, oh, like, I'll put it off. Like, I'll text this person tomorrow, or like,
Mm-hmm.
I'll meet up with this friend tomorrow, or, um, I'll start working out tomorrow or next week. And then sometimes that tomorrow or that next week never comes.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, like I said, not a lesson just for me to be learned. It's, I think, a very important lesson for everyone to learn from. And it just so happens that I'm more exposed to that reality. But the things that we think are so important, if you look at it from the greater scheme of things, especially because I'm around people who have just lost the love of their lives,
Right.
I think ang liit na problema. Parang, okay, I'm stuck in traffic. Okay, like, my hair isn't great today. Okay, like, I gained 3 pounds today. But when you think about it in the greater scheme of things, ang liit na bagay. And it's something that I think we all need to remind ourselves a bit of. Like, and I have to remind myself of that too. Like, in the bigger picture,
Mm-hmm.
I'm alive, I'm breathing, my body can move. I have great friends. I have great relationships around me. I'm loved. I am safe. That's enough. And I think we should end every day sort of thinking that way. That's definitely how I end my day. Every day. My
Oh.
prayers are always like, thank you. Please wake me up to another day. Please wake my parents up to another day. I think that's what the job has done to me. Yeah.
Now, death care isn't just emotional labor, it's ongoing
Mm-hmm.
emotional labor. So, how do you care for your own mental health
Yeah.
and doing this while deeply caring for other people? Do you have your own rituals aside from what you mentioned, your boundaries, or personal practices that help you not carry everything home with you?
Yeah, sorry, just to bring it back, the workshop or like the advocacy that I told you about
Right.
earlier about trying to get like a national end of life care day, it was like a week-long project, but the last day or the culminating activity for that, we did like breakout sessions teaching the funeral home practitioners different ways of self-care, like cooking for yourself, yoga and meditation, or journaling, or
Hmm.
creative arts, because maybe personally as a younger person, I have that advantage of understanding how powerful
Right.
self-care can be. And as somebody who is a mental health advocate, herself, and somebody who understands how important it is to care for oneself in order to care for other people, the number one thing I always teach is you cannot pour from an empty cup. um, One of my favorite analogies is that of the airplane, where you have to put your oxygen mask first before putting it on another person.
Hmm.
Because really, if you are constantly pouring from somebody who is like just completely burned out, or like somebody who is so empty
Hmm.
already, and somebody who had to carry so much emotional toil, you can't care for other people properly too. So for me, exercise is such a big part of my life. Like, I know it takes time,
Hmm.
and sometimes I have like 5 hours of sleep. I'm still gonna hit the gym. Not for, of course, there's vanity there too, but of course, it's really. I always tell my loved ones, like, don't stop me because it's really for my mental health. Like, I need something that's just mine, like a time and space that's just mine. Because when I step into that office, it's no longer about
Yeah.
me. It's constantly about other people and other people I'm caring for. So that 1 hour in the gym, or those 30 minutes where I'm journaling in my room, just give that to me, because the rest of the day I'm somebody else's.
Mhm.
I'm no longer mine. So that is the way I create my boundaries.
Uh-huh.
Because when you're at the office and you're caring for these people, it is absolutely impossible to create those boundaries. Doctors will tell you, like, create your boundaries, don't let that grief be carried home, but sometimes it's impossible.
Yeah.
So you really have to have a routine you can depend on.
Mhm.
And to me, it's just really having a balanced life. Like, I'll meet up with my fiance or my friends, or I'll have a dinner with my family, and in the morning I'm at the gym, like
Mhm.
like clockwork, because I need something to keep me sane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And was there ever a point where the grief of others began to feel too heavy, and how did you navigate that? Like, was there ever a moment that reminded you to kind of pause and just protect your own heart?
I feel like that happens at least once a week.
Oh my god.
I mean, like, it's not even just because I'm an empath. It doesn't take an empath to see a person grieving and crying about the loss of someone they love so much for that to hit you, or for that to affect you. So I think that at least once a week, that grief will hit hard. Like, I'm around it every day. And like I said, this doesn't get easier. I'm
Mhm.
watching somebody say goodbye to their mom for the last time. And I catch myself sort of like, touching my arm or like pinching my arm, because I'm feeling so much anxiety from just watching somebody have to
Yeah.
say goodbye. Because like I said, I will always think it's the hardest thing anyone has to go through in this life. So yeah, the answer to that is yes, I still go through it so often, where the grief of the people feels so heavy to carry. And
Mhm.
like, particularly in the recent days, um death has hit very close to me, and it's reminded me that the work I do is so important,
Yeah.
because I help carry that grief. But I'm carrying that grief for the
Yeah.
people I'm caring for, and trying to help them not worry about the other things. So like I said, not for the faint of heart. But yeah, that routine and the support of my loved ones has really, really helped tide me over. I
Mhm.
mean, with a very strong support system and a routine, I think that's how I've survived the grief that I carry with me every day. My dad has been doing this for 43 years. And I think him having a very strong support system has also helped him. He goes home to a loving family, a home cooked meal, and that's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, is there a memory or story that stays with you, like one that always reminds you why this matters, even when it's hard?
Not one of my very first case
Mm-hmm.
was the son of a coach I had worked with. He was only 17
God.
when we lost him. And I mean, talk about really baptism of fire, like probably the hardest case to date that I've
Mm-hmm.
had to deal with. And the reason it sticks with me is because to this day, I see how the mourning process or the work that we did for this family really helped them. Because in that first week, they couldn't even speak. They were not speaking to anyone or anything. Um, but in the recent years, I have heard of them creating some legacy for him. They during the pandemic, I think they sold, not sold, they were able to raise so much money to buy bikes for frontline workers
Wow.
in the name of their son. And I think that stuck with me, because allowing them the space to grieve, and taking on that burden allowed them to continue, you know, pursuing a life for this boy who didn't have a very long life, but made sure that his legacy would stay on forever. And
Yeah.
I think that that particular family always stays with me, not just because I knew them, but because that was my first experience. But also, I realized, oh, the work we do matters. Allowing them to be
Yeah.
able to grieve, and allowing them that space to just be together as a family while we do like all the other work allowed them to heal in many ways. And when I saw that they did that during the pandemic, I think it really allowed me to say, like, oh, the work we do matters.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that way about a lot of the client families we serve. They always come into our offices crying, and more often than not, they leave our offices smiling. And I think there's not one particular case that I'm going to say that, oh, they were smiling, but more often than not, when I see that sort of like there's a weight lifted off their
Yeah.
shoulders, then I know we're doing something right.
Well, Monsters, you are listening to Heard on Thursdays. I'm your host, Ria Rams, and I'm here with Bettina Jose, and we're talking about death care and life and loss. Now, we are going to be back in just a little bit, so don't go too far because we are going to be hearing more from Bettina in just a little bit, only here on Manila's Hottest Monster, RX93.1.
Monster presents Heard on Thursdays, the iconic radio talk show that made Philippine FM radio talk. Winner of multiple KBP Golden Dove Awards. HOT. Heard on Thursdays. Your host, Rhea Rams.
Manila's hottest monster, RX93.1. Welcome back to Heard on Thursdays. I'm your host, Rhea Rams, and we are here today with the Assistant Vice President of Arlington Memorial Chapels, Bettina Jose. And we are talking about the realities of the funeral industry, the evolving ways we deal with loss, and how facing death can actually teach us how to live more fully. Now, you work at a really unique intersection of legacy and goodbye, helping families both let go but also hold on. Now, what is something that you have learned about humanity through your work?
You know what? One of the things that I was really reminded of when I started working here is how deeply loved people can be, that it can really upend your life when you lose somebody. And I think that portion of humanity, we live in a world where there's a lot of bad too. There's a lot of cruelty in the world and a lot of things that are difficult to maybe come to terms with. I mean, there's a lot of bad in this world, and I know that. We all know that. We see it every day. Especially like even in the menial or small things, like how people push each other on like a train station or stuff like that. How people can be so unaware of other human beings.
Right.
In my industry or in my job particularly, what it's shown me is how deep love can actually go, that it literally almost like palpable can transform a person. I mean, literally, a love of a person can really change the way you live your life. And I think, like during breaks when we were talking, like how lucky are we to be able to experience such deep love in our life? Because when I am in my work and I see how deeply a person will be missed, I also think, how loved did this person make you feel, all
Right.
throughout those years? And I think that's a part of humanity that is constantly on the top of my mind when I'm doing the work that I do. That love can really, I know it sounds so cheesy, but really love can really transform so many different things. Just being loved by one person can save another person's life, can completely alter the path of a person. And like when I hear people talk about their loved ones who have passed on, like, oh, there was a time I almost didn't make it, etc., etc. This person loving me the way they did is what allowed me to continue wanting to live or whatnot. I mean, I am constantly reminded of how love can transform, how powerful
Mm-hmm.
of a tool it is. So when I am surrounded with so much bad, I also think about how much love I see around me, not just in my personal life, but even
Yeah.
in my professional life, where I'm constantly thinking or exposed to the love of people who, just lost someone.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. What is your personal relationship with grief, though? I mean, I imagine being in this space professionally, like you said, it doesn't get any easier
No.
at all. Has your understanding of loss shifted over the years?
I'd like to say it deepened. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when I first lost someone in my life, my first experience of loss rather was with my aunt,
Mm-hmm.
who I basically replaced to join Arlington, right?
Right.
So my first experience of loss, I think you're sort of just navigating, you're like telling nice stories about her and whatnot. Um, but over time, I think my understanding of grief has also deepened. Understanding the most important thing about grief is that it's not linear. It will hit you in waves. One day you're okay, and the next day you're missing this person
Mm-hmm.
more. Um, and I learned that the only way to get through it is to sit with it.
Right.
There's no escaping grief, really. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the biggest lesson I've learned about grief, is that you just have to sit with it. You want to run away from it because it's easier, but what I've learned about it is that it can come anytime. It can hit you. One day I hear a song and I remember my grandfather or my aunt, or sometimes not even somebody I've lost, somebody that I could lose.
Yeah.
And that grief hits me. There is such a thing as like, what do you call that? It's grief you're experiencing before it even happens.
Right.
There is such a thing. And what I've learned is, like I said, it can hit you anytime. And the only way through it is to really go through it.
Yeah.
You can't find a different exit or escape. You have to sit with it. And I think my job has, like you said, it's given me sort of that privilege or that edge
Mhm.
to sort of understand grief in that manner that, like I said, it's not linear and there is no one way to go through it. And hopefully, hopefully, I'm not sure if it will happen for me, but when I do go through a really, really heavy grief, I hope that I can remember these lessons and be kinder to
Yeah.
myself and say, like, hey, you tell these people all the time, you don't have to grieve a certain way. So hopefully I can offer myself or extend that same kindness to myself
Mhm.
because, yeah, I think when you're going through it, it's a
It's
little bit
different.
different,
Right.
once you're the one there.
Mhm.
So hopefully all this knowledge and that deepened understanding of grief will help me. But even if it doesn't, um, hopefully the people around me who know how I've dealt with it will help me through that too.
Yeah. What you said about how grief isn't linear and how it doesn't really go away reminds me of this thing that I saw. That you the grief doesn't really get smaller, you just grow around it. And I saw
Yes.
this like
It's like the
diagram.
ball.
The ball,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like a circle that's your grief and this is you.
Yes.
And then over time, that ball doesn't get smaller.
No, the
You
room
just
gets bigger
yeah.
because I think we learn to live a bigger life are built around that grief. And I think that that's one of the most powerful analogies I think I've also heard of when it comes to grief. It's like grief, that ball of grief that never goes away, but filling up that room in your life or like making that space bigger so it hits you less often. I think there was another video I saw of it where when you're grieving at the start, the room feels so small. So when the ball starts to go around, it's hitting you
All the time.
constantly.
Yeah.
Once the room gets bigger and it's filled with more things, with more life, with more love, and more experiences to tide you over, that grief will still hit you. But now there's more room for it, that it's
Mhm.
not constantly hitting you when it's moving around
Right.
because there's more space. And I think learning to live with grief might be one of the hardest things a human being ever has to
Mhm.
do. But I think it's one of the most powerful journeys as well. Because once you learn how to live with grief, I don't think there's really anything you can't do, honestly. Because learning how to live with grief and sit with it and understand that your life has to go on with it around,
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most powerful things a person can go through too.
Yeah. And for those who are deep in grief, who maybe feel stuck or like they're doing it wrong, because yeah, I mean, I think one of the difficulties with grief, the grief of losing a loved one, is trying to move on, but also not like to also honor their memory, right?
Yep.
So, what advice would you offer to these people? What helps people move forward, even just a little?
You don't have to move forward is the thing. I think that's the only thing I can say is you should never let the world dictate when you get to move on, when you get to move forward, how you decide to move forward. Um, but maybe a reminder that when they do decide to move forward, it is not a betrayal to the person they've lost. I think for a lot of the people I've met, they feel moving on or living life outside of that grief is almost like a betrayal to the person they've lost because they don't want to make that person feel like life has gone on without them. Maybe it's just important to remind these people who have lost someone it is not a betrayal to that person. But you do not ever let the world tell you when you get to move forward,
Mhm.
how you move forward, how you grieve, when to stop grieving. Um, and I know it's hard. I know it's sort of hard to shut that noise out, but I think, especially with grief, that's the only way to get through it is to not allow the rest of the world to determine how you get to grieve, how you get to remember this person, or how you get to move on. There's no timeline for that. So if somebody is struggling with it or they're doing it wrong, the simple answer is nobody is doing it right.
Mhm.
People are
Mhm.
just doing it doing it in the best way they know how, surviving loss in a way that feels survivable to them.
Mhm.
And if that's the way they're doing it, then they're already doing it perfectly
Yeah.
fine. There is no perfect standard for this. There's no playbook for how to grieve or how to do this correctly.
Mhm.
I think people just owe themselves kindness in a time like that.
Yeah.
There's no right way or wrong way. They just they have to understand like there is no moving forward. There's just moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
There's no moving forward. There's just moving.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, is there small practice or quote or even just a truth that helps you sit with loss more gently?
Maybe not a quote. Yeah, I don't think there's a quote for that. But I think like the analogies that we've talked about have always been very helpful for me.
Mhm.
Like sitting with grief is such an important part of the process
Right.
because most of the time those who run away from it are the ones who feel the wrath of grief
Right.
later on. So yeah, I think that the concept of sitting with grief is the most powerful concept I have. Or if there's one thing I would teach or like give that advice to, it's just you have to sit with that grief. And as painful as it is, and it will be, you sort of have to just sit with it because there is no running away from it. And from experience, the ones who run away from it and try to like distract themselves, those are the ones who struggle with grief a lot more.
Okay.
Yeah.
And lastly, for those who want to learn more, whether they're grieving now or planning ahead about, Arlington
Yeah.
Memorial Chapels, where can they find you or the work that you're doing over there at Arlington?
I'm very proud of this new project. So we just relaunched the website
Mhm.
of Arlington. Not a lot of funeral homes actually use digital tools because we are a bit more traditional.
Mhm.
But we did relaunch our website, and there you'll find a lot of grief resources. That's something I'm very proud of. We have an entire section on grief. We have frequently asked questions about grief, like when does grief end, etc., so that people can read at their own pace.
Mhm.
We have a lot of like video links as well, or like books that they can read about grief. Those are all on arlingtonph.com. There's an entire section on grief, and something I'm very proud of is having that. In terms of pre-planning, again, I'm very proud of that new feature. We have that get a quote section
Yeah.
where it's sort of like a questionnaire portion. It's meant to make the idea of pre-planning more approachable
Right.
and less intimidating. So it's sort of just like taking a pop quiz, and then it sort of tells you more or less how much it might cost.
Okay.
And then a care director from our office will get in touch with you once you submit that get a code, so then they can walk you through the actual process or how much it might actually cost based on all the other like little details that might be missed out.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what is the website?
arlingtonph.com.
There we go. arlingtonph.com. And
Yes.
if they want to reach you, can they reach you through the website or are there
Yes, we're
any
very
other
active
channels?
on Facebook,
Okay.
as well as on Instagram. So that's arlington.ph. I hope I'm getting that right. My social media managers will kill me. But yes, I believe it's arlington.ph. Yes.
Okay, there we go, monsters. Well, thank you so much again, Bettina, for this very tender,
Thank
grounded,
you. Yeah.
honestly, very eye-opening conversation. I mean, these are not easy topics at all, but
Yes.
you did genuinely make them feel a lot less frightening. And like you said, more approachable and more human. So once again, monsters, this has been Heard on Thursdays with your host, me, Rhea Rams. Today we talked about the realities of the funeral industry, the evolving ways that we deal with loss, and how facing death can actually teach us to live more fully. Of course, with the Assistant Vice President of Arlington Memorial Chapels, Bettina Jose. Heard on
you.
Thursdays, we will be back again next week, same time, same place, only here on Manila's hottest Monster RX93.1.
Monster exclusive interview.
Monster exclusive interview.
Only from Manila's hottest.
Monster RX 93.1.